Okay, welcome to the tutorial regarding edge loops and putting two cylinders together. Let's take a look at some edge loops in character modeling. First of all, when you model a character, the edge loops, be they horizontal or vertical, tend to extend throughout the entire body. This one runs from pretty much where the collarbone would be, down through the pecs, the stomach, the hips, into the leg, knee, shin, and even the foot and the tip of the toe. So these really don't just suddenly end at a T-joint. They continue and they expand throughout in any part of the body to allow continuity and the flow of an edge all the way as best it can through the body. Sometimes it meets up with polygons and then squeezes into one. Sometimes it splits into two, but there's not this sort of spider web of different edges going everywhere throughout the body just to make it look like the shape. There's another concern of making each of these appendages, be they a leg or an arm, to effectively be a modified cylinder. So with edge flow, especially with characters, these are built to deform. They're not just built to look like a body. You can see this also manifest in pretty much any standing model of a character, where a polyline will run up throughout the entire body as best it can, because the arms, the neck, the legs, and the torso are all really modified cylinders. The concern is to make these cylinders flow in with the rest of the body. Here we have front leg, a back leg, but even though this looks like a kind of twisted back leg of a dog, notice more that the polylines continue through the leg down into the foot. And when you trace them drawing back up, they join the cylinder of the body here, and they will allow much better deformation. So everything is a modified cylinder: the leg, the torso, the tail, and the arms or front legs, and the neck. Same thing with this bear. Very large, but if you don't focus on the silhouette and the familiarity of this silhouette, then you can focus more on the fact that this poly edge flows almost throughout the entire body, and it kind of ends here at the crest of the chest. But in some cases, the neck going up over the shoulder girdle into the torso, kind of rounding out the rump, going back into the hind legs, that's continual, and it doesn't give this kind of twisted ends of an orange poly look. The whole thing is flowed like a large modified tube so that it can deform properly. Even though you're dealing with small chibi models, there's still kind of an edge flow horizontally and vertically in each of these. Same thing with stylized characters. There's really an edge flow through everything. And even in a finger that gets rigged up, it's basically just a cylinder. So character modeling is really all about cylinders. And the technical process of creating one is best done by bringing in very simplistic bits of geometry, knocking down the default axis divisions from 20 into 8 and the height divisions into, say, 6. You can apply, in fact, let's do this. The height should be 10. This will get rid of one extra step for us. And you can come into the outliner now and take this cylinder and duplicate it. Move the pivot point to the end. Again, I'm on a PC, so I just press the insert key and it puts me in the modification of the center pivot. Then I can hold down the V key and snap to vertex. If you are on a Macintosh, you hold down the D for dog, vertex or key until you're done. Then you simply lift the D key up and you should be fine. So for the purposes of this demonstration, it's best to not just have these two selected, but come into, let's get these looking a little softer. So under mesh display, go down to soften edge. And the next thing we want to do is grab the faces that constitute the pizza pie topping of each of these little cigarettes here. So I want to get just the flattened area here, and I'm going to do that by grabbing way too much and then holding down the shift key and reselecting that which I don't like or don't want, and then just pressing delete. It tends to be very specific with the things that I want to grab. From this view, just make a little square selection there, grabs everything I want at the bottom, well done. You could have done this before we duplicated them, but either way is okay. It's not really that much of a hassle at this point. So I'm going to grab the faces on either one of these cylinders and delete the ones I don't want. This is a little tricky because I'm getting in really close here. I'm going to select the ones that I don't want for the ends because we're going to be kind of bringing those ends together. The second thing I want to do is for you to be in a mode that allows you to see the geometry even though we're in hard shaded mode. And that means you're going to come up here to shading and pop down to wireframe on shaded. And what that does is it lets you see the wireframes on these objects even though you don't have them selected. So the next thing we're going to do is grab this and kind of thicken it a bit. And I'm going to do that by scaling all of it up and then simply scaling it down in height. This is going to look a little more like a human torso, a little larger. In fact, torso underscore mesh, double click it, Control C for copy, double click Control for paste, Control V for paste, and from this I'm going to type in arm and torso mesh. I just changed torso to arm, and this is a good point to save your work. I can merely pause the video, so save your work now. There, I just saved mine. So the purpose of this tutorial is to, now that you've seen what edge loops kind of constitute for character modeling and how important they are, we're going to do an exercise here where I want to actually weld this to this sort of modified torso and have it in a way that allows me to keep the edge flow as best I can. You see, we have to resolve these two things. This is a cylinder laying on its side. This is a cylinder laying on its end. And we need to modify these. So this is a pretty good example of arm, say, versus torso. One of the things I'm going to do is snap it to right about here. I'm going to take this arm and snap it to the torso pretty much at this pivot point right here, or at this vertex. So I'm going to snap it there by going into object mode, being in the translate option, holding down V. I'm just going to pop it right over onto that vertex. Okay, so now we've got this on part of the body. I seem to have gotten rid of a polygon I didn't mean to. That's okay, because I'll just take these and delete them as well. And come into edge, double click, and go up to extrude. Extrude out once. Press Y to do it again. Y duplicates the previous command. Or we could insert edge loops. Let's try that instead. And then from here, we're going to come up to Mesh Tools, and you can insert an edge loop. Now this is something that's going to be very useful. What this does is, you see that these are all kind of parallel rings going down the arm. And what if I want to put a ring here? I want to put another parallel ring to this. Well, if I click on and again, this is a very pristine cylinder right now. It's fairly new, so Maya has a very clear understanding of it going in one direction. So if I click on this sort of this line, this vertical line, if you will, it's going to create another edge loop for me along the horizontal plane. And I'm saying horizontal not in kind of real world setup, but I'm saying horizontal as if we're looking at the cylinder like so. All right, so that created what I need. Come in here again to mesh display, and I can soften the edges, and we're back in business. So I'm going to try to modify this so that it goes in to this torso. The first thing I need to look at is how much room do I have to put this into the torso here. Well, not a lot of room. I actually need a little more room up here. So just like I extruded the edge of the arm, I'm now going to extrude this up so that I have a little more room. Do you need to absolutely do this? Well, here's the thing. When I take this arm and I kind of push it into this torso, I need to take out the wall and then introduce this arm as the new wall. And what I'm looking at is kind of a 4-block point, a 4-block matrix on this torso. And with that selected, I press delete because now I've created a hole that I could come in and start filling with the vertices of this arm. So the fact that I've chosen something that's 8 by 6 is very specific. You may not have something this easy, but at least you can understand the concept of what I'm going to do, which is I can match each of these vertices with a point in this square. So I'm going to snap this using vertex snap, V, you can see it go between the two modes when I hold down the V key. Snap it up here, move to the next vertex, snap it to the corner of that hole we just dug out of the torso, and just kind of sequentially go around the arm doing this so that you can slowly weld the points of this arm to the points of the torso. And of course things are going to get very jumpy because it's currently popping along any of the vertices in the corner here. And when I'm done, I've got something fairly rough looking, but it is kind of complete. In fact, let's simulate our setup even further by clicking on the face selection, coming down and deleting 1/2 of the torso. This is the only one we really need to be worrying about right now. In fact, we can take the edge, and we only need one edge at a time, so we can select just this edge. And select the other edge. I'm just doing it one edge at a time. Bit of work, but not insurmountable. And to make this an even better torso, I'm now going to come up and extrude along this axis. So a slightly more believable half body here. All right, back to the arm. These are still different objects you can see when you pull up your outliner. And what you can do now is come in and combine them. So you have a bunch of history here when you combine things. Remember, cleanup format dictates that you come down to delete all by type, get rid of the history. Now you have one object and one only, which is great. But these are still two separate points. We've combined the object, but remember we snapped one point on top of another. So while this is now one object, it is an object where some parts have not one but two vertexes in the same place, because we snapped that onto this. So we could go around here and try to select both of these vertices and weld them, both of those, etc. Or we can go back to object mode, grab everything, and just go up and use merge. Go to the options for it, make sure the threshold is nice and low. Press apply, and it should weld things right on top of each other, no problem. So now when I grab one vertex, it's only one vertex, which is great. So this is the beginning of welding an arm into a torso, but it really does not have a lot of art to it. As you can see, it's rather severe. It's actually got a real hard fall off here and then a sudden angle change, and frankly just looks very automatic. So now we get into the process of kind of trying to smooth this out, and it's best done if we actually have a buffer polygon here, because then we can get kind of a bend. 3 points in space can make a better bend than 2 points in space. So if you want to come up to edit mesh and insert edge loop, under mesh tools, insert edge loop, you can click on the edge loop going in one direction and it will make an edge loop in the other. Maya still understands this as being a cylinder, so it's fairly easy for it to insert an edge loop right where you want it, because it still thinks of this object as a series of two cylinders. Now, the extra cylinder in here allows us to come in here to this vertex, and instead of having such a severe, flat, very robotic looking point of contact, we'll push it up. See, now we're getting into a slight more organic curve with these things, by pushing the points up and out more like a series of circular targets than squares. There's one trick in Maya, it's little known and less used, but it's awfully good when you want it, is there is a method, just like when we hold down the V key to snap to a vertex or the X key to snap to the grid. This will snap to an edge, and it is C. C as in California. And if you snap along, if you grab that little circle with the line that you want to trace in it, or you want it to follow along, then it should do that just fine. But it is kind of a tricky little gambit, and you're not always going to grab it. In fact, that's moving it in the other line. But here you go. You see, once you hit it correctly, you can just drag back and forth and go just along that edge. And what this does is it doesn't compromise the planar quality of these existing polygons. So you are allowed to now kind of do the same to these secondary polygons, get that slight curve going. But I find that actually the curve needs to be on these four corners, on these right here. Those are kind of things that are keeping this a little boxy now. So with these outer corners, just because they're very severe, we've got a nice flow going here. But if you go here, this is not as good of a flow. Could I translate each of those in? Possibly. But since there's four equidistant ones, I can grab each of those and just scale. And that'll create a little more of a circular shape. So now we're getting more of a kind of a trumpet end, or a coronet end, or kind of a, I guess, toilet plunger look to this. And it's because we're trying to imitate sort of a circular, organic look more than the automated look you get when you just use pure computer automated processes. So this is a pretty good begin. If you wanted to now grab these vertices, you can rotate them so that you have an arm that's a little more down by the side. A little bit more. This is obviously going to look very robotic for a while, but this is more indicative of an arrow pose. And the other thing you can do is you can grab edges and rotate them. And since this is a nice complete ring from the orthographic side view, you can rotate this and try to start getting a gradual rotation and a gradual translation down to that arm, a little more organic. And that's looking pretty nice. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is, how do you model with an organic touch when everything is so severe, when you grab a ringlet or when you grab a vertex? Well, there's something called soft select. Soft select is quite an interesting little tool. If I were to read in a sphere, you can see the effect a little easier than if we start modifying the body we've made. So this sphere is a little too much right now. I'm going to give it down to 10 by 10. Soften the edges. So now your nice little sphere here. If I grab a vertex and move it out, it immediately becomes a very spiky ball. And that's because that's what we're used to. We push and pull singular points. But what if we wanted more of an effect of something soft? How do we do that? Well, in soft select, which is if you double click the select tool, the options will come up, and you open up soft selection, turn it on, you get to see how Maya is now thinking about the effect of that area. You see, the yellow, it means 100% effect, and as it tapers off, it's actually going to affect its surrounding neighbors as well in a gradually decreasing percentage from the effect you're doing in the main point. So this is better described through visuals than spoken. So let me show you the effect, especially if I tweak this up. If I turn up the fall off rate, that yellow is now pretty much around a majority of a lot of the sphere. And if I go to the translation tool and pull that point out, I'm not going to get this point this sharp point, I'm rather going to get a soft point. And this is going to correspond to how much or how little I have this fall off rate. So this is obviously going to affect things a little less. And it still looks kind of organic, kind of soft. So soft select is really the way to go if you want to sculpt things by pushing and pulling points. Is it absolutely necessary? No. In fact, I can turn it off. But it is a good little tool because we could have grabbed these vertices with the arm and rotated them, and they would have had a, if we got the fall off correct, it would have had a tapering effect here, so we wouldn't have to deal with any of these other ringlets. So something else you can get used to with this is, in fact, I'm interested to see just how much we've done for our job of making it look good, because I'm going to soften all these edges. It's not bad. I mean, it is a first pass, but what you have here is you have edge flow. This edge actually meets up with another and then continues down the arm. And these ringlets kind of also meet in the body and then get slowly absorbed into it. Let's move down to something where we want to make a leg. Now in this case, I'm going to create the same polygon primitive I had earlier and go into orthographic view. Move it down to about where I would see a leg. Now these legs cannot be sticks. You want to have a little rotation when you have your character kind of even just standing there. And with legs, they are particularly hard because you don't get the benefit of a straight across placement into the hip like it's a leg on a table. That doesn't work. If we go back to our example of the male body, you actually have the effect of moving your hip kind of go up this wall of skin here, because it's really going to affect more of this skin than it is when you come inward. So this V cut, or bikini cut as we call it in modeling, is the way that you want to set up your deformations. This arm kind of gradually went in, but it's got a nice sort of obvious line that's not that compromised. When it meets into the shoulder, you need to carve out an armpit. But right here, this leg, which has a straight-ish line, actually starts warping to accommodate that V cut. And you might see this similarly in like an old Barbie doll or something. There's the V cut here. And it is how you want to make a hip girdle. So this is not going to work. Now how do we manufacture modify it so it does work? Well, we've got a couple of options. First of all, wireframe on shaded. Please don't do this in perspective mode. Perspective is a notorious liar. And I can grab the vertex here, and I can go to soft select. And maybe just by raising it up in soft select, I'm creating that tapering. I could do it like so. I also could, by turning soft select off, I could grab a series of edges, maybe just the edges on the bottom, and I can rotate those. A little more severe, but no less useful. In fact, I'll just stick with that method for now. I'm going to scale it out so it has a slightly wider base to accommodate a wider leg. And then I'm going to, because I'm using edges, I want to grab the front and the back. And I want to rotate these kind of to slowly taper into the body. I don't want just one angular and then suddenly the next one's straight. I want to have a gradual easing into it. I have to use a little less rotation. So here we are. We've got a place for this leg, and I'm going to grab the edge here and then deselect the edge and then make it rotate to match where I'm placing it into the body. It's arguable this is not a severe enough cut, and that is. So I can accommodate these as well. And maybe this is where I use soft select to grab one vertex and then pull everything else down. See what kind of effect that has. I want to make sure to get the one on the front and the back of the body. So I'm going to do a selection square. That's nice. It is gradual. And if I had my garage set up correctly, of course I could make sure that everything was proportional. I'm just sort of spitballing right now because I don't have anything set up to guide me. And we get these kind of stocky athletic legs. So I'm going to taper it down. Now we'll take a look at this back in perspective. And things are kind of lining up. And if they're not lining up, we can make them line up, because this leg is still malleable enough for us to enter different edge loops into if it helps us. Turn off soft select. A soft select gets very visually obtrusive, because when you're simply trying to select things, it can color your entire model in reds and yellows, and you just want to grab certain faces. You don't want to mess around with all that soft stuff. So in this case, we've got a nice little hole here to put the leg onto, but it's not really a hole. The next problem is we've made a half circle, and we're trying to put a hole, a circular whole leg into it, and that's not going to fit. Also, you need a bridge. You can't have legs, the geometry for legs, kind of come together in one point. It's not what you see here. Things, the legs are not coming together in a point, and it just does not happen naturally at all. There's always a space between them. So you need to accommodate that, because you don't want the geometry of this going right next to the geometry of the other leg. So you actually need kind of a land bridge between the two. And the way we can do this with this particular model is I'm going to grab what I'm going to use here is kind of the land bridge, and I'm going to extrude it. And I'm extruding it over here to the other side. And if I get it close enough, I can grab the vertices for this little new bridge and just snap it onto the corresponding vertex near it. And then come up and merge everything together. See, now we have an area that we can start putting together a little more like a circle here to accommodate the leg. But things are still a bit boxy, and rather than just arbitrarily push and pull points, let's understand that this little land bridge here needs some scaling, because humans are kind of bean shaped. We're not these juice boxes, so we don't have flat sections anywhere. So now we're going to deal with the slight tapering of the body, of organic bodies. And for this, you can entertain the idea of soft select, but I don't want to lose that straight edge. So I'm going to make sure that the volume is not touching that area. The effect of the soft select is not really dealing with the center. I'm just pulling that in a bit. Now we've got kind of these hips flaring out a bit, which is what happens, which a human body actually has. And now we're going to look at the edge loops. Come down here to or rather just grab the vertexes at the top, press F so we can get up there real close and personal, and start snapping these together just to see where we are. One. There's going to be some compromise sneaking in here, of course. 2. And depending if you want to make like again, our character is not meant to be very human looking right now. It's not very natural. It is from the side a bit, but it's not from the front. It looks pretty good from the front. We really haven't dealt with this from the side at all, but you can look up any kind of character turnaround in 2D art, and it will show you kind of where you need to grab vertices of the body and move them in and out to make sure that they're all lined up. I also noticed that I did not do a very consistent job with grabbing these vertices and aligning them from the side. So I'm going to go to the side view, and you can see where I moved them fine in the front view, but now I need to line them up in the side view. There we go. Also, you can grab an entire ring just by double-clicking edge, and you can scale it in certain views, and that can be something that you do with soft select on as well, and it will go throughout the body. I'm not going to be too glib about this or cavalier about that, but I did want to get a little slightly natural look. I mean, the front of a person is very different from the back, and this currently looks very equal, and that's not natural at all. But again, with a proper garage setup, you can start modifying those points. This exercise is much more about kind of the technical execution of making a character that has consistent edge loops, whether it is a biped, a hexaped, a quadruped, anything like that. So here we are with kind of matched up rings, and I can see that I've got one that probably needs a cut here to accommodate that, and that's fine. We can do that because again, this is flat. We shouldn't have flat. So there's dozens of different ways we can do this. I like to use the multi-cut tool. Just come in here and hold down the shift key, click once, click again. Oops, that didn't do very well at all. Click again, there we are. And when you press shift, of course, it puts it right in the middle of an existing edge. And to make things round out instead of that flat juice box look, grab the edge and just pull it down slightly. Now again, we're getting into, you think of a plastic doll and a cross section of it. And it always comes in different parts at these different art stores. And you can kind of get an idea by people that had to engineer those to be posable, that they would have to have the bikini cut for the legs. There's always different posable action heroes, whatnot. And this is the engineering that had to go into those considerations for dolls. So this is lining up nicely. I'm just connecting the obvious ones at this point, like snapping there. Now we have a consideration because we've got really kind of 2 extra points on either side of the leg. I can snap that here. And how can we resolve these points? Well, there's 2 different ways of doing this. The first one is you simply take one vertex and snap it into another so that you have a tapering of one polygon, like so. But if you want it to continue up into the body, well, that's fine, but you need to make another edge loop for it. And, well, although not a loop, we took 2 points and snapped them together on the front. In the back, we're actually going to come up here and make a place that we can moor this other one to. Yeah, so I've used the multi-cut tool to cut from here on down to the bottom, and now I have a place for this to be snapped to. And go through the same exercise of grabbing everything. These are different models. So we come up here to Mesh, Combine, Edit, Delete All by Type, History, and of course you want to come up here to Merge, make sure everything's welded. And now you're kind of on your way, and you need to gauge this because you have to say, well, what looks weird, what looks wonky. Right now, just eyeballing it with no reference is, again, a very dangerous thing to do. But you're on your way with the technical know-how of grabbing any of these points. And now that you know how to use the C key to travel along an edge, you can take any of these points and kind of spread them out. And then look again and see if things are working and if they're still circular or they're just too faceted. And work with it there. And that is basically how you go about the execution of creating legs as separate cylinders, arms as separate cylinders, torso as separate cylinder, and welding them together at different angles. If you have any questions, let me know.